In this movie, we're going to cover Crystal options. Unlike report options, these options will carry throughout all your reports after you made the change. Keep in mind this is going to be on a go-forward basis. If you've already created a report and then changed the default options, it won't take effect until, of course, you start adding new fields or changing the report. By clicking on the File menu, scroll down to Options. This brings up the Options window, and as you can see, we have many tabs to work with. The first is kind of important. It's the Layout tab. The Layout tab defines what you see when you log onto Crystal or create a new report. By default, Crystal has chosen Rulers, Guidelines, Tooltips, and Show Hidden Sections. The rulers are what you see, if we scroll over a little bit, here. The guidelines, if you click on the Design tab, appear here. Notice how it makes a nice little grid both horizontally and vertically. Going back to our options, we also see our tooltips, which are those nice little pictures of the different functions that we have available to us. And notice this section is simply for the design view. We also have the almost identical options in the preview. You can also choose that pages start with full size, full width, fit page, and display group tree. You also have grid options, which is a snap to grid. And here you can determine the size of your snap to grid. Usually the default works best. In some cases where exact precision is needed, you can go all the way down to 0.01 inch grids. You also have your field options where you can show field names, insert detail for field headings, and insert name with group. It all kind of depends what you want to see. You can also remove these if you feel you don't need them at all. When laying out, I find it's helpful to have the rulers, guidelines, and tooltips chosen. Also, a snap to grid comes in handy because it helps me line up exactly with my grid lines. Let's go ahead and click on the Database tab. The Database tab helps you kind of see what's in your database in a way and how you relate to it and pull it onto your report in Crystal. For example, the Tables and Fields section, you get to show name, show the description, or show both. A lot of databases just have names, they don't really have descriptions. It depends. In some cases they have both, in which case you might want to show both. You can also choose to sort the tables alphabetically, or sort the fields alphabetically, or both. It really depends how you wish to work. In some cases it comes in handy if you work with certain fields and you can find them quicker. You also have a Data Explorer options here. This is where you get to see what's in your databases. For example, you obviously want to see your tables, so you can pull them in. Views, which are kind of virtual tables if you will, and stored procedures, which take tables and create new result sets from them. You can also filter out table names, like all the tables that start with F or R or 001. It really kind of depends. You can also sort by the owner of the table if you need to specify them down. If you do choose these options, your views will be limited by that filter. You also have some advanced options down here. These you really need to be careful with. You really have to know your database server. You wouldn't want to check these and find out that your report, because of all the functions you're asking it to perform on the server as opposed to your local PC, might be too much for it to handle. Again, a lot of it's going to have to depend on the size of your database and how powerful it is. The default options for Crystal include using indexes on server for speed, making sure the database server is case insensitive, selecting distinct data for browsing. Now, select distinct data for browsing is kind of important because when you're creating the report and we're filtering the report, when you hit that drop-down box, you really don't want to see every March 1st that ever happened or every Houston that you see. You pretty much want to see one date or one office or one whatever you happen to be looking for. This is especially true if the case that the data is being repeated. If you see 27 Houstons, it really doesn't help you because Houston is more than enough if you choose it once. Other default options are verify on first refresh, meaning check the database once you hit the refresh button to make sure nothing's changed. Also, verify when database drivers upgraded. This could have happened without your knowledge, and Crystal goes out and checks to make sure it's got the latest and greatest and there's no conflict. The last one is a Crystal default, which I've warned about before. Automatic smart linking of tables. Again, Crystal links based on table and field name. This means that if your field names are not exactly identical throughout every single table in the database, your links could be faulty. I would recommend taking it off. But again, it really has to depend on the design of your database. In this movie, we're going to continue our discussion of our Crystal options. These are the options that set the defaults for what we want to see or do not want to see for every single report we create. We left off on Database. Let's go ahead and click on the Formula Editor tab. Now the Formula Editor allows you to take database fields and modify them, group them, change them, and or calculate. It's kind of a mini app within Crystal, but these are your standard default options. It defaults to Courier New, and of course you can change this in 10-point font. You can also choose the colors of your comments, of your keywords, of your text, and your text selection. You can also choose to use the Windows system color, which is the Crystal default. There's also formula languages that you can use. One is Crystal syntax and basic syntax. Crystal syntax may be a little bit easier for the beginners. Those familiar with programming, such as BASIC, can go ahead and use basic syntax. The null treatment is what to do with the field that is null. Null has a special value and special meaning in the world of databases. In this case, Crystal defaults to exceptions for nulls, which is good enough in most cases. If you find you have problems, you can default values for nulls if you see fit. It also gives you this nice sample of what it looks like. For example, my comment in my Formula Editor will always show up as green. My keywords will always show up as blue. My text and my text selection will default to black and light blue highlighting. Let's go ahead and click on Reporting. Reporting gives you, again, more default options to apply to every single report that you create, past the point that you save these, of course. Crystal has a lot of kind of built-in products that you may or may not have. If you don't have them, that's okay. It simply does nothing for you. Some of the options you will use, however, will be down here. Saving the data with report, discarding saved data upon opening a new report, re-importing sub-reports, suppressing printing, and so on and so forth. You can also choose to autosave reports if you're working on them and forget. Let's go ahead and click on Fields. Now this one I'm going to have you kind of play around with. These are the different type of fields that you may deal with. String, number, currency, date and time, and Boolean. We're going to use string as an example. By clicking on string, it brings up the basics that every time you pull a string into the report, how you want it to appear. Here are the qualities. You can make it read-only, you can suppress it, suppress if duplicated, lock in position and size, and can grow. You can also choose borders for your string field. Now this is any string field, one that comes from the database or one you create yourself in the Formula Editor. You can also choose to hyperlink it if you see fit. Now if we go to number, you get a few more options. You get the same options as we saw before, but numbers, of course, can be expressed in various ways, with or without commas, go out to a certain number of decimal places, or a custom style, which you can then customize if you see fit. You can even choose a type of decimal separator you are. So for example, if you're working with European clients or reporting on European standards, your decimal separator is going to be a comma as opposed to a period. You can also choose which sign to allow in front. These default options, of course, require you to play around a little bit and see how they work out for you. What these do, when you set them up on your Crystal report, and every time you use your version of Crystal, it will appear in the format that you have defaulted it to. Now keep in mind, if you pass along a report to someone else's Crystal options, their default options on their PC will rule the day. Another important option that we haven't discussed quite yet are the fonts. These help determine the default fonts you want to see in all your reports. Remember, this is PC specific. If you pass a Crystal report physically off to someone else who has their own version and their own setup and their own defaults, their defaults will rule the day, as it were. From here, you can choose your fields, your summary field, your group name field, your text object, your field titles, and your charts if you see fit. Again, this is going to require you to play around a little bit and see how it works out for you. If we click on Fields, then every single field that we pull into our report, aside from our summaries and the other categories listed, will be determined by these defaults here, or by the defaults we choose. You can even choose the color, or to underline it, or to strike it out. There are a few more options, but we're going to save those advanced options for a little bit later.